Talking with the experts.
And, I often get asked that, Rose. It's a really common question, like, how could you do that? I could never do that. Well, let me say that the audience is different every time. And this brings it nicely back to where you started with your questions. It's all about the audience. It's not about you. So the content, yes, could sell itself. The content can run itself. I don't have to think too hard anymore after 22 years in the way I deliver the content, but the examples I give and the way I tailor it to those individual people in the meeting is completely different from one week to the next. And that is what I love about serving the audience, changing what I know works, but in changing it and delivering it in a way that's going to resonate with them so that they can all walk away and use it is exactly why I can run the same thing word for word every time.
Talking with the experts.
Hello and welcome to Talking with the Experts. My name's Rose Davidson from rosedavidson.com, and Talking with the Experts is about all things business by business owners for business owners, and you can find it on all good podcasting streaming platforms and on YouTube. And I would love it if you'd go and subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to press the bell so that you'll get notified when I upload new videos. Today, my guest is Michelle Bowden, and Michelle is going to talk about how persuasion smart are you? Now, as a business professional, there is nothing more important than the art of persuasion. And Michelle knows all about this because she is an authority on presentation and persuasion in business. She is a CSP, which is like the highest designated for speakers in the world, and she's the creator of Persuasion Smart Profile. So welcome, Michelle, and you can tell me a little bit more about what the Persuasion Smart Profile is.
Thanks so much for having me, Rose. It's so great to be here. Hello, everybody. So yes, the Persuasion Smart Profile is a psychometric assessment tool that's taken me 10 years to develop and launch. I've seriously been incubating on my nest to make sure that it was a useful tool for people in business. Essentially, what it does is it reports on your persuasive strengths and weaknesses at work. So what we know, the body of knowledge on persuasion tells us that most people there are four approaches to persuasion in business, and most people are strong in two of them and weak in two of them. And so the point, of course, is that when you're persuading someone, you're persuading them. You're not trying to persuade yourself. You're already persuaded because you're the one doing the talking. And so instead of doing what would come perhaps natural for you, you need to work out what does the other person need from you and flex your style so that you can be persuasive in all situations. You need to do what they need, not what comes naturally to you necessarily.
But isn't it, the point of a conversation is to give value to the person who you're actually speaking with, not using your own spin on things?
Yeah, that's true. So what we know, if there were 4 steps to being persuasion smart, the first step is know yourself. And that's why I created the Persuasion Smart Profile, because I wanted people to be able to complete some kind of a test or assessment where they could receive a report that explained to them what they were strong and what they were weak at. The second step is to know the other person and to be able to elicit that person's needs in a very short space of time. Step 3 is to build your persuasive muscle so that in all situations you are persuasive, not just in the ones where it feels comfy and natural. And then number 4 would be to make sure that you do in fact flex or adapt your approach so that the other person gets what they need. What do they need? Give it to them. So yes, You're quite right. Add value.
Yeah. So I guess as we're starting to learn, or and if you didn't already know that, when you're giving a talk to somebody or a presentation to somebody or whatever, it's always the audience's needs become first. Now, when you're trying to persuade someone, how much does body language come into that?
Yeah, body language is a part of it. So one of the approaches is what we call a performer, and a performer is someone that is characterized by charisma and charm. So if you could imagine a bird that was best associated with the performer, it's certainly the peacock. They fan out their fabulous feathers in a fantastic fashion, and they shimmy and they dance, and they have to do everything they can to persuade the peahen to choose them. So in that way, there are people who need that. They need to be swept up in your enthusiasm and your charisma and your charm. They need to be captivated by you, and your gestures and body language would have a big part to play in that. One of the other types is what we call the connector. And connectors are people who need that really strong emotional connection in order to believe you, in order to be persuaded by you. So, of course, the bird that best suits that is the budgie. It's the perfect pet. It builds rapport with everybody, the budgie in the cage. And again, body language plays quite an important part there, because that's more about the matching and the mirroring, whereas a performer is just about expansive and expressive gestures and facial expressions to sweep you up in their enthusiasm. A budgie is more likely, or connector is more likely to match and mirror your body language so that you feel that affinity, that sameness with them. Yeah, so in that way, body language, very important.
Okay, so what about, I guess, the person that you're actually speaking with? How can you find out if you're on the right track into persuading them into your point of view?
That's a good question, and you're doing it. So ask a question. Ask a question that elicits some kind of feedback is a really good way of doing that. The more you know about the 4 approaches to persuasion, then the quicker it is for you to assess it on the spot. I have a keynote speech that lasts for about 30 minutes. And in that 30 minutes, I can give enough information to the audience so that they feel pretty confident to go out. And when they're conversing with anyone, they would be able to pick, because of course, we're not going to be only strong in one of those 4 approaches. Mostly we'll have a strength in 1, 2, maybe even 3 of the approaches in combination. And so our stakeholder might be the same. They might need message credibility. They might need you to show your own credibility. They might need you to build that emotional connection, or they might need you to really turn on your charm and charisma. And so I think it's probably something that people need to delve more into, so that they understand what are the options that people might need, and then how to actually develop yourself. I talk about the 1% growth, the growth mindset. Every day there's something you could be doing that makes you more persuasive all the time. For example, today I'm going to use people's names more. Tomorrow I'm going to look people in the eye more when I speak to them. The next day, I'm going to learn a model for structuring my communication so that I say it in the simplest, clearest, well-structured way that I can. So there's just so many things when you look at it. There's hundreds of things you could be doing and learning to make yourself more persuasive when you're talking with friends, family, or in a work context.
You have a very good friend of mine who is a profiler, and he's got a course that is called Reading Faces.
Cool.
And I really learned a lot about reading someone's face, and I give all these little tells that they don't realise that they're giving, or
That's right.
even the structure of their face is a tell. So it was really interesting to take his little course and learn a thing or two about having a conversation with someone. So if you're an introvert, say, because I know we all there's some introvert in all of us, but for the one who is overly introvert, how can they use these persuasive skills to get their message across, or to persuade the other person that their idea is the be all of end all?
Yeah, sure. Great question. So an introvert is somebody who derives their energy from within. It's not someone who's shy or not confident. It's just someone who gets their energy from being in their own company with reflecting on their own thoughts and feelings. So that person is no less persuasive than someone who's extroverted. You are likely to see an overlap with that particular filter, the introvert, extrovert, ambivert filter. I don't know if your listeners would know that. So there's a continuum with this introvert question of yours. So introvert at one end gets energy from being on their own, from reflecting on their own thoughts and feelings. Extrovert gets energy from being with others. And then there's a middle of the continuum. It's not pervert, it's ambivert. And an ambivert is someone that does both equally. So sometimes they get energy from being by themselves, sometimes they get it from being with others. Now, that filter, there's sometimes an overlap with the 4 approaches to persuasion. So you are more likely to be an extrovert if you are a performer, but you could be an introvert or an extrovert if you're a connector. The 2 other types that we haven't talked about yet, one's called the expert and the other one's called the authority. So an expert is somebody who really it finds message credibility to be incredibly important, whereas the authority finds personal credibility to be important. So the birds that we chose for each of those, the expert is an owl, the wise owl. There's some hilarious photographs of owls sitting against a tree and they're so camouflaged into the bark of the tree. They look like the classic university professor, with the cardigan on and the patches on the elbows. They're sort of.
I can just imagine it. Yeah.
I often make the joke. This is an owl at the work Christmas party. They're just kind of melding into the background. They're not out there entertaining everybody. Whereas the bird for the authority, which is all about personal credibility, that's the eagle. Eagles own the space. They own the room. They when they walk in the room, they leave no question that they are the expert in the matter. They have the runs on the board. They know the best way forward. They shouldn't be argued with. They just own the space. And there's actually, when eagles mate, they tumble and twist in this fabulous way out of the sky. They really literally take up the sky when they're doing that. So back to the introvert extrovert question, you can see that you could be an introvert or an extrovert for all of those 4 approaches. You are more likely to be an introvert if you are an owl, if you find message credibility to be the most important thing that helps you decide whether or not to be persuaded. And you're more likely to be an extrovert if you're a performer, but there can really be a mix. So the actual answer to your question about introversion and persuasion is understand what is your need. What do you need in order to be persuaded? Understand what does your stakeholder need, and then make sure you flex. So you might find that you're communicating with someone else who's an extrovert and who really prides themselves on having logical, analytical, rational arguments where there's science and evidence-based logic in the way that it's communicated, and that might suit you down to the ground communicating with someone like that. On the other hand, you might have to persuade someone who's a performer and they just are not interested in an introverted approach to the way the message is sold. They need you to get a bit of excitement about this. My 22-year-old daughter, Holly, has said to me for many years, she says, Mum, moods are contagious. Is yours worth catching?
Quite a nice little saying. I quite like that.
She's a sassy number, that one. She's right, though, isn't she? That your mood is contagious, and particularly if you're presenting or communicating or pitching to a performer, then you do need to get a bit of something about you so that you feel like you yourself are excited by the matter, even if it's not really your nature to be too extroverted in your delivery. Yeah,
it's sometimes it's hard to you think you've got someone persuaded into your way of thinking, and then all of a sudden they twist it all around, and you realise that you have to start all over from the beginning. And it sometimes gets me on how advertising persuades you to do something. I don't know whether it's subliminal or not, but it's like you get persuaded to buy a service or a product or whatever just from the advertisement. And these marketers are very clever. And, I sometimes still trying to work out how they actually do it. So
Well,
that
there's a science to it, right?
there has to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you know, sometimes we present, your listeners will have maybe they'll have a memory of doing this where they've presented some information to someone twice. On the first occasion, they absolutely nail it. They smash it. They are so good. The audience loves them. They say yes to the idea, whatever it is. That person goes home that night. They love their own guts. You know, they just want to crack open the champagne. They feel like they nailed it. And then maybe the next day or the next week, they present exactly the same information to a different audience and it flops. But they did exactly the same thing. They might have even been wearing the same suit. If it was a woman that wears lipstick, perhaps they even were wearing the same color lipstick, you know, everything was the same. The slides were the same. And on the first occasion, they smash it. On the second occasion, they flop and they feel sorry for themselves and sad. So what's going on there? On the first occasion, when you presented in your own preferences and you fluked an audience of people who also have that preference. So of course they loved you and they want more, and you all felt good about that situation. Where it's flopped, you've presented in your own preferences, and unfortunately you've got yourself an audience there of people who have very different preferences to you. And so you may as well be speaking in another language. They don't even understand what you're on about. And that's why you get that yucky feeling that you just didn't connect, you just didn't get there. And it is a terrible feeling when you flop like that. I can't tell you how many calls I get in a normal week when we're not in COVID. How many calls do I get from very senior people who say, I've just presented at a board meeting and I have just done the most career limiting move. I have gone blank in front of the executive, or I've been told by my board chairman that I was boring, or the executive asked me to come back and present it again when I had a clearer explanation of what I was trying to say. Oh my God. So, you know, these people are ringing me and they are desperate because they've flopped in a mega way. And yeah, there's a process we should be following, especially in a pitch like that to a board. There's 3 strategic phases to a good presentation: analysis, design, delivery. And you've got to follow those processes. You've got to follow those formulas if you don't want your executive to say that kind of mean stuff to you.
But isn't it, I guess if you're going to do a presentation or a speech or a pitch or whatever, isn't it advisable to know who your audience is? I mean, this is what I teach when I'm teaching people how to present with PowerPoint, is that you know, the presentation is not about me, it's about my audience. And so isn't it up to me to find out, you know, the types of people that are going to be there? I mean, there's no good trying to tell a joke to a bunch of, you know, graphic designers who know everything about, you know, Photoshop and try and tell that same joke to a group of doctors. So isn't it up to us as presenters, speakers, persuaders to know who we're actually speaking with?
Absolutely. To put it in really simple terms, so there's these 3 strategic phases: analysis, design, delivery. Analysis is where you work out, what am I trying to achieve as the communicator or presenter or salesperson, and what does my audience need to hear from me? And there's a 5-step process called the 5-step analysis that takes about 20 minutes to apply. And when you do that, what it does is it gets you right into your audience's shoes. So you completely understand, what are they thinking, feeling, and doing in their current state? And what do you need them to be thinking, feeling, and doing in your desired state for them at the end of that meeting, at the end of that email you're sending, at the end of that tender response? You know, what do you need to achieve? And yes, you're quite right that that's got to be first. That's the first step. And without that, then phase 2 is the design phase. You can't design a good presentation. You can't design, to your point, a good PowerPoint deck. You simply cannot design good resources if you haven't done your analysis correctly. And then you can't do your delivery right either. So that's phase 3. Phase 3 is the delivery or the stagecraft. So that's all the way you stand, move, gesture, your voice, your eye contact, the way you interact with the audience, the two-way, the questions, the way you use your materials, your slides, your handouts, you know, everything to do with the way you deliver the messages. Phase 3. You can't do any of that stuff well if you haven't got a really good design of your message and great slides. And then you also can't do any of that if you haven't done your analysis right. So I really do take this strategic approach to the teaching of presentation skills. First things first, analysis first. It's the most boring bit. bit, but without it, you can't do the rest of it right. Analysis,
right.
then design, then delivery.
Yeah, it's so important to get to know who your audience is that you're going to be delivering to. I mean, you could deliver the same presentation to a different group of people, but the way you present it obviously has to be done differently. So,
I had a chance to present to MAC makeup artists, MAC cosmetic makeup artists. And the first time I did it, it was hilarious. We still got good results, but they could have been better. And I talked to the client afterwards and said, we need Play-Doh. These are kinesthetic learners, right? These people can't sit in a training course. I mean, I can only imagine how hard it is for them on Zoom now, on virtual presenting, but even in a live meeting, these people were finding it impossible to sit still. Then for the second event, we gave them big chunks of Play-Doh and they massaged it and fiddled with it while they were learning. And gosh, the results were just so much better. So yes, understand your audience and tailor your approach to make sure that it's exactly what they need.
Absolutely. And I think that it's probably a step or a process that's missing when a lot of people are doing presenting. They just, it's just rote. They just do it by rote, and they just do it, the same way, time and time and time again. And, I've sat through some presentations that have been absolutely boring. And I've sat through presentations that have, really persuaded me to either buy their service or product or, or leave the room at lunchtime because I just couldn't stand it.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I was speaking with a potential client a couple of days ago who won't be a client, just between us and the World Wide Web.
That's it.
This client said to me, oh, no, my trainers don't need the analysis and the design phases because we create the materials for them and we tell them what to say. All we need is the delivery. And that's a big mistake that clients have made. I've been teaching presentation skills for 25 years. And it's a really common mistake that people who just do not understand the art and science of good persuasion, good presenting, it's a common mistake. It's a complete arrogance that, and it's a lack of understanding of the team. A trainer in a team is not going to say to their boss, I don't like your materials. They're just going to try their best to deliver it with the materials. But when people like that come to me for public speaking training, the first thing they say is, Michelle, how do you deliver someone else's content and make it feel like it's yours? And the answer is you can't, unless you've completely re-storyboard it from scratch with, as you say, a thorough audience analysis. Then it's never going to feel like your content. And you're always going to feel a little bit like an imposter or a fraud that you're delivering someone else's gems of wisdom and not your own. A big mistake. Don't do it, people.
Yeah, no. I remember when I was working at Customs, I was elevated to be a trainer.
Right.
And, I couldn't understand why at the time the head trainer said, Rose, you've got to, make your own material. And I said, no, I'd just rather use yours. And I tried to use his. I didn't understand a bloody word of it.
No. And imagine how dreadful that is for the poor audience on the other side of that
it was
too.
boring.
It's not tailored to them. You don't understand what you're talking about. You really don't have that, moods are contagious, back to Holly's saying. You don't have that inner passion for the subject. And if you don't love yourself and it, how do you expect your audience to love you and it? They just won't. And if they're not really persuaded, then like you say, they nod, they smile, they pretend they're on board, but then 2 weeks later you find out they didn't implement it, they didn't do it. You thought that they were on board, you thought they were persuaded, but actually those people were never going to do what you were suggesting because they simply didn't believe you.
No, and you have to be believable, and that's I think that's another issue that people come away with, because a lot of people, like salespeople, when they go to networking events, they espouse the company's tagline or whatever, but they don't really make it their own. But you can still use the tagline, but make it and use it and say it in your own way, not just what you've been told to say. And I think that's really bad of corporations to make their clients, as you alluded to before, to make their clients say or do exactly what they say. Yeah, it's not
Stick
right.
to the script. Yeah, I think I've got a really great blog on my website, michellebowden.com.au, on how to write an elevator pitch. So if anyone's interested in knowing how to do that, you can go and have a look at it there for free. What you're talking about really there is the elevator pitch. So at one level, I agree that it's good for companies to be really clear on what is our brand, what are our 3 brand words that we want people to be thinking whenever they're thinking of our company. And yes, you do have to stick to the company line on that stuff. But the way, as you say, the way you explain it to a human being that you're having an interaction with needs to be your words, in your vibe, in your style, and also tailored to whatever their needs are. So being clear on a really good elevator pitch that you can slightly tweak depending on the person you're talking to is a really cool thing to have in your toolkit of communication things.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for sharing your website and the free thing that's on there.
Yes, there's lots of free things.
Oh, excellent. Good. I'll have to go and have a bit of a squeeze.
Wonderful.
So, Michelle, I would assume, and I'm hoping I'm assuming correctly, that you have written a book.
I have. It's called How to Present. Go figure. I'm a presentation skills trainer, so what else would I call the book?
Absolutely. So is that available on Amazon or anywhere in particular?
Yeah, you can get it on my website. If you buy it on my website, I'll sign it to you and I'll send it over as a gift. If you buy it, you can buy it anywhere else, any good bookseller. It's published by Wiley, the biggest business book publisher in the world, and it's a bestseller. So it's available readily.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you.
And podcasting, do you do any of that?
Not really, no. We have some resources on our website that people can purchase in addition to the book. We're not really doing podcasts, but I do blog fairly regularly and just put up little free videos for people just to give them their tips. My main way of helping people in our business is either as a speaker at conferences on persuasion and presenting, or potentially people come to my 2-day persuasive presentation skills masterclass that I've been running for 22 years and that I'm about to run tomorrow for the 912th time.
Oh my goodness. Well done.
Imagine that, 912 times over 22 years in groups of 10.
You've changed the words around.
So some of it does come out the same now after all those years.
Wow. Don't you get sick of saying it 912 times?
No, and I often get asked that, Rose. It's a really common question, like, how could you do that? I could never do that. Well, let me say that the audience is different every time, and this brings it nicely back to where you started with your questions. It's all about the audience. It's not about you. So the content, yes, could sell itself. The content can run itself. I don't have to think too hard anymore after 22 years in the way I deliver the content, but the examples I give and the way I tailor it to those individual people in the meeting is completely different from one week to the next. And that is what I love about serving the audience, changing what I know works, but in changing it and delivering it in a way that's going to resonate with them so that they can all walk away and use it is exactly why I can run the same thing word for word every time.
Yeah, I thought that might be the case, but I just thought I'd ask anyway.
Yeah, I don't think I could do it for 22 years, though I didn't really love it either. And
absolutely,
it's so important, isn't it, in a small business? If you're not doing what you love, then change what you're doing.
Absolutely, yeah, I totally agree with that. I totally agree. Yeah, I guess you've alluded to your website. Anywhere else people can find you, Michelle?
Probably not. Just www.michellebowden.com.au. I'm on LinkedIn. I'd love you to connect with me. If you're interested in getting free tips and advice over the social media, then LinkedIn's probably the best way to connect with me there. I post 3 times a week and always just lots of tips and great ideas for people that you can implement in little bite-sized chunks. That'd be lovely.
Good stuff. All right. Well, any last wise words of wisdom?
Oh my goodness. Like what?
I don't know, how to be persuasive. How can, say, one business owner persuade another one, maybe if they want to go into partnership or be affiliates or, get into bed, so to speak.
Okay, then maybe one last piece of advice I'd say in all those different contexts is what is it that you want? Be clear on what you want. and make sure you ask for it directly. Don't ask for it directly at the start of the meeting because you'll break rapport and they'll never say yes, but work out what are the formulas that persuasive people use to ask for something that they want. What are the words you shouldn't say? What are the words you should say? What are some of the things you should and shouldn't do? There's hundreds of them. And plan it all out in advance. Plan out your approach to the persuasive moment and always have a backup. So if they're not going to say yes to the thing that you most want in this meeting today, then what can you get the yes for, so that you don't both walk away and feel that it was a waste of time. You never want to walk out of a meeting where people think, I want my time back or I want my money back. So what's your best alternative to the actual thing that you wanted? That's my off the cuff. That's my tip. Work it all out and have a backup plan.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, if you need to learn more how to be more persuasive, please reach out to Michelle on her website. She said that she has lots of freebie things there, and so she's got her training course as well. So yeah, reach out to her and she'll be more than happy to accommodate you. Michelle, thank you so much for your time today. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you, Rose, so much for inviting me. It's just been lovely chatting with you today.